So the history, philosophy, and objectives of imprisonment and the development of prisons. As a result of these developments, numerous fortifications such as Fort Santiago in Manila, Port Pilar in Zamboanga City, and almost every significant coastal towns along the width of and breadth of the Philippine archipelago were built in Spaniards as a defense of against marauding pirates and bandit groups who refused to recognize the colonial authority of Spain. So basically, uh, one of the history is the Port Santiago in Manila and also the Port Pilar in Zamboanga City, where Spaniards uses that place to defense against marauding pirates and bandit groups who refuses to recognize the colonial authority of the Spain. So next is the English immigrants settled in American colonies, bringing with them the pattern of their social and political institution. In addition to banishment, the English convicts to the colonies added a lot of people hands-on knowledge of English prison system. Hence, American prisons were copied from European cousins across the Atlantic Ocean. So the first recorded prisons in the colonies was established in Amsterdam in the state of New York, sometimes in the middle of the 1960s. Though incarceration was also resorted to as form of punishment, it was a common use was for those undergoing trial and for those who refused to pay bets. Connecticut and the Maine use undergo facilities to incarcerate offenders for many years due to lack of funds for the establishment of formal prison institution. So basically, the first recorded person in the colonies was established on 1960s in Amsterdam in the state of New York, which undergo punishment and also undergo trial. So this is the sample picture. This is where the prisons go. So next we have the electric chair for prisoners of Sing Sing prison. Sing Sing prisons became famous, or rather infamous, the world over and was the plot of many movies fell because of Sing Sing but was inflicted aside from flagging or of flagging denial of reading materials and solitary confinement. The shower bath was a gadget so constructed to uh, drop a volume of water on the head and lock naked offender, and the force of fluid water hitting the head of the offender caused so much pain and extreme shock that prisoners immediately sank into comas due to the shock of sudden drop in the body temperature. The Sing Sing bath become more frequent when plugging was declared illegal in 1987. So basically, ang kaning Sing kaning electric chair is kato na siyang which is para kanang hatulan ng isa ka tao. Yes. Then ang Sing Sing bat, which is one person gatindog din binabatan ang sa kamot, and then bubuag ka ng daghang tubig. So this is the example of electric chair. This one. So next is the Sing Sing shower for the prisoners to bath after working the fields for 8 hours daily. So the shower bath was the gadget so constructed to drop volume of water from the head of a naked offender who forced to icy cold water hitting the head of the offender causes so much pain and extreme shock that a prisoner immediately sunk into comas due to shock and sudden drop of the body temperature. So basically, ang sing-sing water is um, a person which is naked and then um, gibaat ang mga kamot and then naggatindog bubuan siya og ice cold water and then to the head so that it will cause so much pain, no, and extreme shock which is immediately result into comas and sudden because of sudden drop of body temperature. So this one, so you can see this picture. So a prisoner which is this one nang naades tunga and then ang katong buan bantay which is siyang mo wira sa para mabuhos ang tubig. This one. So Airborne 1821. This was the first of two prisons authorized by the New York law of 1816. The second prison was Sing Sing authorized in 1821. Replaced New in Greenwich Village built in 1796. The emphasis was on individual cells, block architecture to create an environmental to rehabilitate and reform to separate the criminal from of all contact with corruption and then teach him moral habits of order and regularity by means of serving disciplined inmates work as contract convex labor 10 hours per day, 6 days per week. Alexis de Tocqueville visited Sing Sing in 1831 and wrote about its system and discipline. So basically, in this one, the first two prisons was authorized by the New York law of 1916, and then the second prison was the Sing Sing authorized in 1821, and also in this one the inmates were live with convict labor which is 10 hours per day and 6 days per week. This one. So next is the prison cells in the urban system. So inmates frequently were driven mad by isolations, and soon enough this system resulted in a substantial number of suicides and insanity, and the practice was abandoned 5 years late after it was introduced. Solitary confinement was a method of punishment was abandoned in the United States because prisoners cannot be made productive and unprofitable. To maintain the urban prison system was modified to allow the prisons to work during daytime in common areas but still maintain absolute silence and then spend their nights in solitary confinement. A facility was built inside the prisons to serve factory which well contractors slaves labors of prisoners. So basically in this one, inmates were frequently mad, no, and of this kind of system, which is it will result to a lot of suicides since they can't handle the pain. And then uh, this also urban system was also modified now to allow prisoners to work during daytime, and then in common areas, but still maintain their absolute silence, and then spend their nights in solitary confinement. So that's it. So by the late 18th century up to 19th century, Pennsylvania became a leading innovator in prison operations, and this became the Pennsylvania system, which was the rival of Auburn system. During these times, these institutions were built in the state of Pennsylvania. The Walmart Street Jail, 1790, the Western Penitentiary in 1826, and the Eastern Penitentiary in 1830. This one. The Pennsylvania system, based on the concept of solitary confinement and rendering labor, each cells had small exercise area allow the prisoners to maintain physical conditions and not physically debilitated, debilitated, not so much because it is humane. The civilized to do so, but because the prisoner is more viable, it physically fit to continue producing more for a longer period of time. So Pennsylvania system is focuses on allowing prisoners to maintain their physical conditions and to exercise, example to exercise, and then um, um, allow them to do uh, in order to be physically fit. This one, this one is the sample. So the first major development of prisoners, five, the five major development of prisoners. So there are five developments of prisoners existing in the United States during the 20th century. These are the northern industrial prisons, southern and industrial chain dogs at the other work camps, and custody oriented person and treatment oriented person. Even today, these are five existing. So we have five major deployment. We have five deployment of prisons. So and then which is using until now or existing until now. So first we have the northern industrial prison. Is so called because they are found in the industrial belt of the northern United States. The penitentiary at McAlester, Oklahoma, is a typical example of industrial emphasis of prisons in the United States. The prisons are made to form labor to earn revenues for the upkeep of facilities and profit of the state treasury. The three methods used to benefit prison labor to contact state amount of state system. So first we have the northern industrial prison, which is so called because They are found in industrial belt. So basically in northern United States, and also penitentiary, so the state penitentiary at McAlester, Oklahoma. So next is the southern plantation prison. This name implies southern agricultural plantations are located in the agricultural deep south of United States. This penal institution possesses vast land holdings and uses prisons excuse me, labor to produce agricultural products out of the land. The harvest accrue to a benefit of the state government were part of income in use to finance the operating cost of facility. These plantations have minimal facilities and therefore an inexpensive to operate. So, southern plantation prisons is found in the south of the United States, which is names implies southern agricultural plantation. So basically, this penal institution it is more focuses on uh, the labor to produce agricultural products out of the land. So chain gangs to secure the prisoners against escape when they are on on the work site far from the prisons. They were chained together, hence the chain gangs evolved at night. The chain gangs were locked up in small portable cages for lack better confinement facilities, while the road chain gang scheme was originally imprisoned on black prisoners. White prisoners were used until that decades later in Alabama. Well, prisoners were deployed only in 1940s. Many times, chain gangs deployment is decentralized to the local counties, engage their always under little central control. Windows is done because of these conditions were suffered by the chain gang. So, chain gangs is to secure no prisoner. The meaning of chain gangs is to secure the prisoners against escape when they are on the work site far from the their prison jail. So they were chained together, and then which is evolved at night, and then chain gangs were locked up locked up in small portable cages. So the custody appointed prison is based towards prison security and the prevention of escape, and not the this type of prisons is a remnant of prisons of past century when prisoners are punished by confining them only to their cells and isolating them from rest of society in type of setup. The only activity custodial were which the custodial security force provides. This approach use supermax facilities where the occupants were hardened criminal who are likely to escape in given a little freedom of movement in this type of prisons. Many prisoners become bored, irritable, and excitable at the least provocation. So this base is this custody prison is based toward to prison security and the prevention of escape and nuts. So basically, this ang mga persons basically ang mga persons ani ay became bored, irritable, and excitable. So the treatment-oriented person become the verge in 1960s when this became the legal in most every penal institution, but treatment-oriented persons emerged only in the early part of this country when the Hoover Act because law in the state Wisconsin in 1913. This was legalized work release program in this state. 5 years later, another law was enacted in the state of Mississippi. This was the Furlan program. It was twice 37 years before the Northern Carolina followed suit with their own work release law, but when the Prisoners Rehabilitation Act of 1965 became law in the treatment-oriented system in U.S. Pusun system. This basically in this one is in 1960s when become illegal almost every penal. So basically ang treatment-oriented persons emerge the early part of in the part of this century when the Hoover Act became law in state of Wisconsin in 1913. So the treatment involved a whole array of educational, vocational, counseling, the other service which were made available to the inmate in some of penal facilities. Treatment programs were even individualized and particular treatment need to every inmate involving a psychological, sociological, social, and many other components were released, and for lodges allowed the qualified and deserving prisoners to be released and be employed in the free community while returning in the penal facilities after the work hours. Enable prisoners to spend part of their time in the free community. So next we have the Cesare Marquez of Beccaria Bunisana. Bunisana. It was during this period of intellectual high tide that was Englishman by the name of Jeremy Bentham uh, and an Italian who swore by the name of Cesare Bisogna was Businana, but whose name was known for the wide infields in communities as Beccaria because he happened to be the Marquess de Beccaria born in Ezekiel. Marco Lombroso's made great contributions in the advance of criminology. These two men, Bentham and Beccaria, became the strongest advocates to the Enlightenment in the fields of criminology, and their writings were considered as the classical schools of criminology. This one. So John Howard was born in 1726 in Clapton and the son of successful businessman. His childhood was stark and restrictive. He received a little quality time from father, and his mother died when he was perhaps five. As a result, he shone on academic powers. His powers sport were no interest to him, and he suffered severe bronchial attacks. In short, not much was expected of John Howard. At the age of 16, he was apprenticed to greengrocers, but the death of his father shortly afterwards left John Howard the master of his own life. This is John Howard. Form of punishment. One of the punishment inflicted on prisoners in the short, which simply involved carrying heavy loads from the place to another and then return in same place over again. Every other method device used to make prisoners suffer the treadmill where prisoners is constantly made to constantly climb stairs. Prisoners are made to climb the treadmill continually during dusk with prisoners lodging up to 11,000 feet of stairs per day for the equivalent of 3-4 step mountains climb per day. The Anglo-American customs of imprisonment. The names of dealing with lawbreakers can be traced by the invasion of Englishman William the Conqueror. Undoubtedly, William found the number of numerals that were used to continue under cerebrals, and he added to their number still execution, mutilations, exile, and banding were the most popular names of punishment at that time. Jails were for holding prisoners until they were punished. When William the Conqueror became the rule of England, he ordered the abolitions of the death penalty, but this does not mean that he is more civilized than just a human rule. William the Conqueror. Using his influence, William gathered an army of 6,000 soldiers, which he used to conquer England. After placing him on the throne, he rewarded his vassals from Normandy with the lands of many of English nobles. William the Conqueror began to raise funds by enacting attacks of his on his people in order to find out how much he could tax them in establish causes. This cause can be through the counted in the kingdom down to the last chicken. This is William the Conqueror. Age of Enlightenment. So, if the 18th century was established in the advent of the classical school of criminology, the next century is dawning of yet another school of thought regarding in the punishment. This is the Fusibest school, which ordered Italy, which latter half of 19th century. This school opened in 1820 by a Jewish physician and anthropologist who is greatly influenced by the writings of Charles Darwin. Cesare Lombroso's positive criminologist objected strongly to the classic school view that punishment could be made to fit the crime by fixing sentences that are tied strictly to the nature of criminal acts. Cesare Lombroso described the crime of social phenomenon. He was an Italian prison doctor, and the father of criminology. So Lombroso formulated his thinking based on his studies of a notorious brigand by the name of Villela, the convicts of such agility that he was rumored to scale steep mountain heights, carrying a load of ships of his shoulders. This brigand openly boasted for his crime. This could be reasons why Lombroso's claimed that criminals have the uncanny ability to quickly recuperate from their wounds and was no moral consumptions. So basically, Cesare Lombroso was Broso. Cesare Lombroso was he was an Italian prisons doctor and also a father of criminology. So on the death of Villa Lombroso conducted post-mortem examinations on the bandit, and when he opened the skull he found distinct depression which he found only in inferior animals. From this he conclude that the criminals are atavistic beings who look like savage the apis and retain the ferocious instinct of primitive men and inferior animals. This is Sari Lambosos. Enrico Ferri, a criminal sociology by Enrico Ferri, professors of criminal law, deputy in the Italian Parliament, etc. Appleton the company in 18 um, 1899. Ferry argued that since causes of crime could be identified and isolated, he calculated that it could be controlled through preventions. And one of the best preventive measures to the informations of society so that the basing ground of crime is clenched. He asserted the problem of criminalities with those he so far possible because of gradual transformations of society will eliminate the swamps in hit the missions of crime. Human behavior is largely a copying mechanism in responding to surrounding institutions. Increases in uh, public disorder are often response to worsening economic conditions. This is Enrico Ferri. So Clifford Shaw in 1921 conducted the research on 100,000 identified school truants juvenile in conflict with the law and adult offenders from the Chicago school. His research tried to pinpoint the kind of communities these offenders grew up in. He published the results of his work on a volume titled Bisquincy Aris. Clifford Shaw conducted research Chicago. This is Clifford Shaw. Some of the significant principles agree upon the adopted in the conference are summarized. First, we have the aim of imprisonment in informations, not inflictions to suffering. Next, we have the prison should emphasize rewards more than punishment. Next, we have the prison's administrative post should no longer be filled with political appointees. All sentence should be indeterminate with release coming upon proof of information. Religion conducted on vocational training should be given high priority in activities of the prison. Both prisons should be classified so that hardened offenders are never mixed with minor offenders. It is personally that state is providing support service for release prisoners until they are reintegrated into society. Prison sentence should be standardized so that prisoners everywhere receive comparable punishment for the comparable crimes. The state of partially responds for the incidents of crime and should take all possible actions to ameliorate the conditions that are conducive to crime. One step in the direction should be to make educations of all children obligatory. All of the correctional institution in which state should be united into the centrally controlled system. So by the turn of 13th century, however, promotions and parole was already proposed formal incarcerations in penal facilities as methods of official punishment. So by the 13th century, probations and parole was already incarcerations in penal facilities and also methods in official punishment. So corrections in 20th century, American began to become now specific some 30 years earlier than when the National Prisons Associations held its first National Congress and in Ohio in 1870, leading practitioners into field of corrections and prisoners from across the land fully prepared to present their expert views on approach of humanize the handling of people sentenced to suffer imprisonment. This mode of release is also rare to the intermediate system law where the prisoner is sentenced with minimum and maximum period of imprisonment. So this mode was released intermediate intermediate sentence and also this sentence is has a minimum and maximum period of punishment. So next is we have the sex offender treatment programs. So what is the sex offender treatment program? So in the comprehensive program of counseling, the treatment offered by the Department of Corrections, community supervisions for convicted sex offenders and other incarcerated individuals are department identify as the likely to benefit from sex offenders counseling. Temporary release program. So refers to the program which allow release of persons from the place of his or her imprisonment for a limited period. It helps the transitions of persons from to the community. So basically, temporary release program is more focuses on allowing the uh, one person to be released in from the place of his or her imprisonment for the limited period. Transitional service program defined as the educational service defined as educational activities and support designed as asset students with disabilities to reach measurable post-secondary goals and determination of specific transition service needs stem from individual results of various age appropriate transition assessments. Sing Sing Correctional Facilities. So, uh, maximum security prisons located in Ossining, New York, in the scenes of in use since 1826. It was one of the oldest penal institutions to the United States, and it is also among the most well known in the country, especially notable for its harsh conditions in 19th and 20th century. This is the this is what looks we call the Sing Sing Correctional Facilities. This one. So next is the prisons and Sing Sing prisons on the Hudson River of Ossining, New York. originally known as Mount Pleasant Prison, was constructed in the village of Sing Sing and the east of bank of the Hudson River, some 30 miles north of New York City. It was designed to provide additional prison space to the replace of Newgate Prison. Constructions was undertaken in 1825 by convict laborer under the supervision of Elam Leeds, warden of Auburn State Prison. He officially became head of the new prison new of when it opens in 1826, though it was completed until uh, 1828. And the initial facilities had 20 cells, and the prison population rose in the mid and 19th century, resulting more constructions. So basically, these facilities had 18 cells, and also during 19th century, the populations were rise, and then it is resulting to more constructions. And one of the notable visitors of the prisons was Alexis de Tocqueville, author of the Democracy in America. The French government sent him and Gus- Gustave de Beaumont to the United States in 1831 to gather information about American penal system. The two men were amazed at the total subjugations under which prisoners work and administrative power. The warden well at Sing Sing. Resigning was warden of Sing Sing in uh, Leeds was resigning as in 1830 was 1830 and returned to Auburn in 1838. He was asked to leave the prisons a year after the death of prisoner who was punished severely of meaning illness. Despite his record, Sing Sing reached Leeds in 1843. This feeling of floggings were compliance punishment of Sing Sing, frequently used in the nine tails cruel wiping contraptions whose lashes were often striped metal bars. It use was finally abolished of the New York State legislature in 1848. The state were carried out Sing Sing until uh, 1963. The infamous death chair was later moved to Green Haven Prison. So, five of the most common sin types of criminal uh, punishment. So, first we have the incapacitation. Capacitation seeks to prevent future crime by physical moving criminals away from the society. This punishment can be traced to ancient times. Terence Mitay and Hong Lu write a punishment as a comparative historical perspective. Findings Bureau of Justice Statistics have brought the effectiveness of this method into questions. According to BIS data, about two-thirds percent of persons released back into the society were arrested for the new crime within 3 years. Two, we have deterrence. The goal of deterrence is to pursue citizens, possible offenders to re-offenders to confirm rules of law Let's explain that four types of deterrence and generally recognized. Three, we have uh, retribution as one of the oldest forms of punishment. Retribution has roots in the Judeo-Christian traditions of justice. In her book Criminal Law, Lisa M. Storm explained that retribution prevents crime by giving victim of society the certain sense of satisfactions that defendant has been punished appropriately, reinforcing the belief that criminal justice system is working effectively. Modern example of retribution includes the widespread practice of imposing fines as well as enforcing mandatory sentence policies for certain offenders under the law. Rehabilitation is a common prison policy in America until in the 1970s. Rehabilitation focuses on helping criminals and prisoners overcome the barriers to lead them to committing criminal acts. Resor- restoration, restoration, a radically different approach to criminal punishment. The goal of restoration is for the offender to make direct aims to both the victim and the community in which the crime was committed. During the process of resurrection, victims immediately process which both the offender made to share feelings and concerns. That dialogue offers victims the opportunity to be heard and offender to make amends and receive forgiveness. Restorative justice is often used uh, cases involving youth offenders. Uborn originally cells in 18. Warden William Britton borrowed the concepts of solitary cells from so-called Sibana system, when design unique five-tiered cell block of two rows and single cells placed center of building. This this pattern of small inside cell blocks was later adopted by the most state persons in the United States, whereas the Pennsylvania system inmates did uh, hand, hand, handicraft under the cells. Uber person labored and congregate workshop offsetting imprisonment costs of fulfilling private industry contracts. A hidden pathway with small openings surrounded the works of impression. The visitors is to superficially monitor the inmates. Auburn briefly implemented a three-level classification system. Under the main offenders labored the workshops during the day and retired separate cells at night. Seriously offenders alternative days between solitary confinement and congregate work. The most 100 criminals were placed solitary confinement without work after numerous suicide instances, the mental illness and attempted escape. The governor of New York terminated the classification system and experiment in solitary confinement. Subsequently, all male inmates work congregate shops by day, returning individual cells at night. In 1825 were relegated to the attic and excluded from regular work, and to ensure inmates did not corrupt one another. Britain's successor Elmer Lanes enforced a quasi-military routine to absolute silence, strict discipline, and economic productive. In response to Bell's had shaven inmates based on the strips, clothing, sanitary march in lockstep formations to the from from their cells for meals and work assignments. Eventually, overcrowding made a silent system unindiscernible from Uber's system of discipline deteriorated into corrupt and routines of harsh punishment after the Civil War. Unlike Uber's principle, Eastern Penitentiary was in, intended to keep PH separate even as they work in order to prevent any earthly distractions that might impede the repentance bench of term penitentiary located in Cher Hill of outskirts of Philadelphia. In me represented one of the most impressioning recent actual achievements in the United States to date, the mundane innovations such as running water plastic cells. Two out of found in several that the perfect solution secures prisoners from all fatal the involving mind urban plan which more likely to curable states to the profit of communicator. So this is Pennsylvania system. This one. So family development programs, we have the family development programs is advocates from understanding all children are born learning, and also we are committed to build a centered educational system. So management program is a goal. The main goal is anger management therapy to teach people how to examine their triggers. And it also helps people adjust and how they look at situations. So the mind state person contains cells and pets similar to underground certain as long ago Rome that used detained offenders undergo trial in some cases to hold sentenced offenders where they were stripped to death. Beginning in 1910, the U.S. Congress passed away law declaring various crimes to be under federal jurisdiction. One of those is the White Slaves Act in 1910. Sanitizations of a prison system in U.S. first occurred in South Carolina in 1866 when the State General Assembly ordered the transfer of prisoners from the control of the counties to the state. In early part of 20th century, the federal prison system existed only in name only. The prison landscape was anything but disorganized because prisons wardens were political appointees and professional running their institutions in as if it is their own fiefdom. It was only in 1930 was centralized of federal prisons began to take a serious tone when the Cooper Committee of the House Representatives rendered report about the federal prisons. This resulted to the law created the United States Bureau of Prisons under the wings of the Department of Justice. This bureau holds office of Washington DC to administer to all the penal facilities to the Office of Federal Prison System. So that is my report all about, and thank you.